Hey everyone, Internet PCS book reader here. Today I want to talk about Madonna in a Fur Coat by Ali Sabahattin. Before we tackle the book, this is one of those cases where the author's life is either just as or even more interesting than the novel itself that he wrote. So let's get into that first. Ali Sabahattin is a leftist in Turkey where there is an active state censorship from the right-wing ruling class. Born and raised by a progressive parents who named him after his friends, he fell into poverty after World War I and had to go to Germany to find work. After spending part of his life abroad, at the age of 23 he went back to Istanbul and knocked on the door of the journal Resimli Ay or Illustrated Month, an independent leftist journalist office that was run by the wife-husband duo of Sabiha and Zakaria Sertel. He produced a ton of short stories on the journal until his friend pushed him to write his first novel, Yusuf from Kocayak, a story about the struggle of being a working class in Turkey that became a hit in Turkey, along with his second novel, The Devil Within Us. But as the Sertels become the main opposition of the right-wing government and his writing became more known, unfortunately the Turkish government also started to pay more attention to him, which got him into trouble because Turkish censorship is actual cancel culture type of shit and it's not modern comedians who joke bomb and then immediately cry about getting cancelled instead of writing better jokes. Actual censorship comes in many types. For example, in America, the 50s was roughly during the time when capitalism started to become unpopular there, so they paid universities to come up with excuses and false philosophies in order to change the common sense of the people about what capitalism does to their livelihood. But when TV media started to become popular, they realized that any media that just shows the difficulty of life under capitalism inherently educates the masses about how bad capitalism is, whether the people who made those movies intended to do so or not. So the bipartisan parties there, both Democrat and Republican, created the Hayes Law. TV regulation that is basically just state censorship without calling it state censorship. This is the censorship law that George Carlin was making fun of. Not the cancel culture whatever that a lot of very soft people are complaining about nowadays. The Hays Code kept changing as history progressed, but the new Trump censorship was basically just the Hays Code 2.0. Back then, the original Hays Code banned what they consider as anti-capitalist messages and promotes their nationalism, militarism, and anti-LGBT among many others. It's why movies like Transformer and Top Gun was funded entirely by the US military, and why in a lot of old movies, even children movies, the villain is queer or queer-like. Now, unlike in America, where the government will lie to you in order to backstab you, Turkey is more direct in their censorship and put the author to jail many times, especially after he made Marco Pasa, a satirical news media that is very critical to the government corruption. At one point, the Turkish government even banned the author from getting a job in his own country at one point in his life. Eventually, in 1948, around the time where assassinating and killing leftist progressive is trending, the author, recognizing the danger to his own life, tried to flee the country after they banned his passport. He was assassinated during this escape. And because of that murder, he died at the young age of 41. Considering he only started publishing short stories at 23, he only had a very short 18 years to become such a prominent author. I mean, besides the poems, short stories, and the satirical journals, he have written only 3 novels with the 2 I mentioned before, and then his last work that I want to talk about, this book. Because of the time this book was written, where the authority already noted and marked him as a dangerous figure for his writing, unlike his first 2 novels, he have to sidestep some topics and cannot be too direct with reflecting the truth about Turkish government or their Western ally too much. So this time, instead of writing a full human drama, he wrote romance instead. But the main subject of the story, Raif Effendi and Maria Puter, is not even the main protagonist. The main protagonist of the book is the nameless narrator that was first introduced as a person who is down on his luck and has been jobless for a while. He was wandering aimlessly on the street, looking for a job and failing when his former classmate Hamdi spotted him and invited him to his house to hang out. Learning about the narrator's misfortune, Hamdi started to control the narrator, making fun of his useless hobby of writing short stories and poems, which is most likely something that the author have experienced himself since he have lost his job to government censorship before. But Hamdi also offered him to come to his office the next day, which the narrator took. It is there that the narrator was given a job by Hamdi to log on the bank deals with other banks, and his place of work in the office is right across the bank German translator, Raif Effendi, our main character. German translating is also a job that our author have experienced a lot. That is because there are two representations of the author psyche in this work, the narrator and Raif Effendi, and this is their first meeting in the story. The narrator is a version of himself when he was younger, and Raif Effendi is another version of himself when he grew older. But unlike the author, whose disobedience to the Turkish authority causes his suffering and eventually his assassination, Raif is a very meek man who, despite his skill in multiple languages, including his original Turkish and then German and French, and despite having worked at the office perhaps longer than anyone else, he is forced to work for a low-paid job willingly without putting up any fight, despite everyone in the office seems to hate him, that even Hamdi often finds the smallest reason to berate the older man. Even the younger narrator, the younger author representation, grew to dislike him the more he see how meek Raif was. But one day, after Hamdi came to yell at Raif again for something that is the fault of another worker, Raif drew a portrait of Hamdi that the narrator saw, and seeing that painting, he became aware of the reason why Raif never befriended anyone at the office, because Raif is too observant. He sees through the social facade that people use to make themselves accepted in Turkish society, and he wants none of that. He eventually grew closer to Raif and see him as some sort of mentor figure. He became close enough to meet Raif's family, who also treated Raif with disrespect that he calmly accepted. But Raif is sickly, and eventually his sickness became grim enough that he had to leave the office. It was then that he asked the narrator to go get his belongings that was left at the office, which involved a dirty scarf, some socks, and a notebook. When he brings the item to the hospital, they talk, and the narrator begged Raif to cling to life because he still had so much more he wanted to learn from Raif. He wants to understand people as Raif understands them, and he wants to understand why people are like that to Raif, which makes Raif give the notebook to the narrator to read. It is in this notebook that we are introduced further into the life of a younger Raif, who again took a lot of inspiration from the author's own life. He being forced to join the World War I, losing a lot to the Ottoman Empire, and also being sent by his father to Istanbul and even to Germany to study. It is also in German where we got most of the romance aspect of the story. That is actually a really well written tragedy that also might be inspired by the author's own life. But I leave Eros, Agape, etc. to unserious breadtuber with a lot of free time to have different costume in their essay. What I'm more interested is the duality of the author that exists in the narrator who is learning how to live from Raif, his older version in the story. When we are young, there are usually two things that we look ahead. One is the person you wanted to be, and the second one is the person you don't want to be. It is usually those two things that grounded you in life in your future, where you can be one of those persons that reminds people that there are still sane people on earth. But despite your wishes, oftentimes you still took some of the persona of the person you don't want to become. It's one of those you become the person you hating. It is the duality of man that is often explored in interesting ways, like Kendrick often explored in his songs. He even had an entire album for it called Mr. Moral and the Big Stepper. And almost every time, once a person grew older and turns into a version of themselves that their younger self would hate, a person will have to confront his inner demon or be crushed by the weight of his own guilt that he risks turning into more and more hateful as a person. Raif, as the notebook has told the narrator, failed so miserably at his life. He gave up on himself, he gave up on other people in his life, he gave up on the one person that he acknowledged, the one person he couldn't live without, and as a result, he also gave up on another person that he didn't even know existed for a decade after his return to Turkey to live like a zombie. The narrator, finally fully learning what kind of person Raif is, what made him who he was, thought that he will live his life differently. And if you zoom out of the story and back to the real world, the author, Ali Sabahattin, lives such a different life than Raif. Besides some resemblance to his own life, he and Raif is an opposite of each other. Ali did not just accept the injustice of other people. Despite having to go through a much more miserable life than Raif because he was sent to prison times and again, unlike Raif, Ali fought back knowing full well that a better life is possible. Through his poem, through his satirical journal, through his stories, he fought back. And it is only because of that, despite the Turkey government assassinating him at such a young age, you guys are all hearing the echoes of his fight from even someone as small as me. I give this book a 5. What do you think? Let me know if I missed anything, so leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it. See ya.